So in the previous section, we saw how various Koreans had been exposed to the different changes and modernization projects in Japan, saw what had happened in the United States and their various institutions and systems, and were inspired by the changes and wanted to implement those in Korea and try to bring about dramatic and rapid reform. This did not succeed, unfortunately. Many of them had to flee the country as a result. But with this vacuum, many Koreans and the Joseon court decided to bring in foreign advisors. So in this next section, we're going to look at the role that foreign advisors played in Korea during this time of transition from the pre-modern to the modern period. So it's 1882, and some officials in the Joseon government suggest that the court should invite and hire foreign advisors. If you were the Joseon king, would you approve this opinion? Why or why not? Let's first take a look at Kim Yoon-sik. Kim Yoon-sik had passed the civil service examination in 1874, and he had been dispatched to Tianjin as an envoy. So he had gone from Joseon to the Qing dynasty, trained in the Qing arsenals and the factories, because at this time the Qing dynasty was also involved in various self-strengthening programs, which included strengthening and modernizing their military. So Kim Yoon-sik, he traveled to the Qing dynasty and was observing these. He was also involved with the signing of the treaty with the United States and the appointment of Moellendorff, a foreign advisor we will take a look at momentarily. In 1884, during the Kapshin coup, Kim Yoon-sik had called Yuan Shikai for help in order to suppress this coup d'etat. In 1894, he participated in the Kabul reforms and the Kim Hong-jip cabinet as Minister of Foreign Affairs, but he was dismissed from his position in 1896 and eventually exiled to Jeju Island. Paul von Moellendorff was an interesting figure. He had studied law and had moved to the Qing, working for the Imperial Customs Service in Shanghai. But he was hired as a foreign advisor by the Joseon government on the recommendation of Lee Yong-jang in 1882. And so when he arrived in Joseon, he became the Inspector General of Joseon Maritime Customs in Incheon. You remember that with the signing of the Ganghwa Treaty in 1876, Incheon was one of the first ports that was opened up to trade. And because it was an essential hub and one of the first major hubs for trade for Korea, this was a very important position. He sided with the Min family, the royal Min family, in terms of fiscal policies against the Enlightenment Party, so against the individuals that we examined in the previous section of this lecture. These were the individuals who wanted rapid reform, were inspired by Japan and the United States. Well, von Moellendorff actually did not agree with these Koreans and was more conservative. In 1884, he brought Min Young-ik to Allen, and we will discuss Allen's role in just a moment. But he also advised the Joseon court to sign a treaty with Russia in 1884. However, he prepared an additional secret treaty to keep distance with the Qing dynasty after the Kapshin coup d'etat. Because the Qing army had been called in, by the Koreans to help suppress the coup, and as a result, the Qing had increased their interference in domestic affairs in Korea. Moellendorff then prepared this secret treaty and he understood that Qing interference was not good for Korea and wanted to keep them at bay. But once this was discovered, the British then ended up occupying Gomen Island, and Moellendorff was dismissed in 1885. Min Young-ik had also visited Japan on several occasions and had eyewitnessed the dramatic changes that had occurred there. But his perceptions and attitudes towards reform was different from those Enlightenment Party members. Partially this was because he was a part of the royal family. So he had been adopted as the nephew of Queen Min, passed the civil service exam, and when the Joseon court decided to create a special military force called the Pyeolgigun, he became the manager of this. This was a newly organized military corps that was to be modern, and because they received special attention and the traditional army units were neglected and they had not been paid properly, the soldiers rioted in 1882. Now, they targeted Japan because the military advisor that had been brought in to train the special military unit was Japanese. So the traditional soldiers, they targeted Japan, and Min Young-ik, and Min Young-ik's house was destroyed as a result of this. In 1883, he visited Japan again as an unofficial member, and he was also dispatched to Tianjin in China for the negotiation of maritime customs. So you can see here that while Min Young-ik was aware of the changes and reforms that Japan had implemented, he, being a part of the government and holding official positions within the government, his attitudes were different from the Enlightenment Party members, and he took a more measured and moderate approach. In 1883, he was dispatched to the United States as the main envoy. So he delivered a royal letter from the Korean king to President Arthur. He visited various expositions, factories, hospitals, the military academy, and other educational institutions. And upon returning to Korea, he suggested that teachers be sent from the United States to Korea in order to teach new modern subjects to Koreans. And so with this, we had the establishment of the Yugyang Kogwon. This was like the Royal English Academy, and 3 American missionaries were sent to Korea, including Homer Hobart. But Min Young-ik, he was nearly killed in the Kapshin coup d'etat because he was a high official in the government. Enlightenment Party members targeted him, and he suffered many sword wounds. But Horace Allen, the American missionary, was able to save his life, and so he continued his activities until 1905, where he then sought political asylum in Shanghai. Horimoto Reizo was a Japanese army lieutenant who would go on to become the military advisor to this special military unit in Korea. So in 1881, the Japanese minister to Korea recommended that he be invited. And so he came to Korea. He selected volunteers, organized this new modern army called a Special Skills Force, and Min Young-ik was appointed to the head of this new force, but Horimoto Reizo was in charge of the military training. Horimoto even suggested that Korea establish a military academy. However, because the traditional army units had not been paid properly, they revolted, and they also felt discriminated against. And so in this conflict, where they targeted the Japanese, Horimoto was killed in action.